Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the third Around the Globe webinar as part of our Outlook Forum Plus educational platform. Today, we're going to take a look at the Canada market as we anticipate the return of international travel. Fully vaccinated Canadians can travel to the US without a return quarantine. This ease of travel restriction will largely boost outbound travel from this key source market in the summer and the fall. Canada is a strong market with historically substantial airlift and long length of stay. Canadians know our state well, and they will come to visit all year round when they're ready. I'm thrilled to have some great speakers here today to dive deeper into the return of this market. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jennifer Montero, our Director of International Marketing.
Thanks, Carolyn, and welcome everyone. We're so happy to have you all with us today. We're excited to have this next chapter of our Outlook Around the Globe series with a spotlight on Canada. As Carolyn mentioned, the recent announcement of the reopening of the air border in order for return without a quarantine to Canada is very exciting, and it's perfect time for us to start the outbound travel from the market. We as Visit California look forward to welcoming all of you to California. Today, we will hear from market experts to share their insights on the Canadian traveler and what we can expect in the coming months, insight on airlift and what the airlines are doing to ensure consumer confidence, how our California partners can work best with journalists in this competitive environment, and recent consumer sentiment and visitor projections with our new research tool. Also, what the industry can do to keep top of mind in this competitive market. Visit California has had a strong presence with brand advertising, trade efforts, PR, and content programs for over a decade in Canada. With our proximity, we've been able to target both coasts, east and west of Canada, messaging for the air and the drive markets. We love Canadians. They're year-round travelers, and they love to go to areas throughout the state. Let's kick off today with an update from Andy Levine, Managing Director of DCI. So over to you, Andy.
All right, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Jennifer, and thank all of you for the opportunity to work with your wonderful state and to talk to you today. I'm just going to share with you a big picture, 5 key takeaways that I hope will be valuable to all of you. The first one is Canada's rising vaccination rate. So you see Canada's in blue here, the United States is in red. Canada got a much later start than the United States, but as you see, starting in June, it sort of picks up, like a rocket ship. And right now, in fact, in the last 2 weeks, the Canadians have surpassed the United States in terms of vaccinations. Right now, the latest numbers, 63% of all Canadians are fully vaccinated. That's versus 57% in the US. So I think the big takeaway here, within the next 2 months, 75 to 80% of all Canadians will be vaccinated and open to travel. So that's number one. Number two, if you could advance one, Walt, is our top competitors in for California right now. Our top competitors in Canada are actively marketing. So Hawaii, Nevada, New York, Texas, and they're in the middle. Florida, probably our largest competitor. They're all investing significant advertising dollars in Canada right now. Canada essentially is seen as the low-hanging fruit in terms of bringing back international travelers. So the competition is stiff. Canadians need to be reassured that California is open for leisure travel. And for all of the DMOs on this call, it's very important that your signature experiences are well known to Canadians. Moving on to number 3, and you're going to hear more from Tim Liu of Air Canada in a moment here, but airlift is rebuilding, and we also have some new carriers coming online. So I'll give you the quick overview with Air Canada. You'll get more from Tim in a moment. Right now, well, as of August 9th, 7 routes to 3 Canadian destinations will make up to 91% weekly flights from Canada to California. This fall, Air Canada anticipates increasing that to 161 flights. And again, you'll hear more from Tim. WestJet's Also very, very active in the market. They've announced an updated schedule with 7 returning daily flights starting in October, so that'll be 49 flights per week. Finally, budget carrier Flair Airlines has announced plans to start offering direct service to California in November. And then Porter Airlines in 2022, the second half of 2022, will also be offering service. So the takeaway here, airlift is ramping up very, very quickly for the fall of 2021 and beyond. Number 4, Canada's economic conditions are incredibly favorable right now. And this is, to me, actually the most interesting slide of the whole presentation, of my presentation, at least, not the whole presentation. Consumer confidence plummeted in Canada in the early months of the pandemic, just dropped like a rock. But as of the last month, according to the Conference Board of Canada, it has returned to pre-pandemic levels. So that's very, very good news. Second bullet in the middle there, household savings is way, way up. So in 2019, the average Canadian saved $479 during the course of the year. That is up tenfold. The average Canadian in 2020 saved $5,574. So there's a lot more disposable income that people have right now. Finally, probably the most important element in terms of economic conditions, the exchange rate is now at 80 cents on the dollar. That's the best it's been since 2018. As little as a year ago, it was about 70 cents on the dollar. So what we have here is the takeaway here, the perfect trifecta. Canadians are confident, they are more flush with cash than they've been in recent history, and they're facing the best exchange rate since 2018. Final point, in times of uncertainty, if you can advance one more for me, we believe the travel trade becomes even more important. Canadians are a conservative bunch. We expect they will rely heavily on travel advisors, both tour operators as well as travel agents, as they begin to travel again. So I think the takeaway from a DMO's perspective, it's a good time to double down on your relationships with the travel trade in Canada, at least in the short term. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And Jen, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Andy. And it's wonderful to see the encouraging signs, and it's great to start the webinar hearing some positive steps with Canada. Now we're going to move into research. Here at Visit California, research is a key part of all of our programming efforts, and we have 2 experts here to really share what's going on in the Canadian market. We're excited Visit California is also doing our own international consumer sentiment research, which Heather will touch on. We also have some great expert tips from Robyn, who has some information that DCI did also on the Canadian marketplace. So we have 2 research experts today, Heather Huckeba with Visit California and Robyn Domber with DCI. So I'm going to have a start with Heather.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. So we're really excited to get to share our consumer sentiment research that we've started. Well, for those of you who have been following along, whether it's our domestic research or now that we've moved to international research, you'll see on this next slide that we've been saying that we need to understand the recovery process through multiple lenses. We usually are mostly looking at economic, and our forecasts take into account all those great macroeconomic indicators that Andrew just pointed to, which are making for a favorable forecast for Canada. But we know that in addition to those economic factors, public health, which can lead to travel restrictions, could delay that return to travel. And then how consumers feel in each market can either delay or speed that recovery. So we've been trying to look and evaluate through all of these lenses. To recap the economic, we are updating quarterly. You can, so we've updated in July our forecasts with tourism economics. If you're like me and have been watching a lot of Olympics, let me just say that Canada has traditionally been in the bronze position in terms of contributing visitor spend to California. But for the next couple years, Canada will be taking the silver position as we wait longer for overseas markets to come back into play. So Canada has always been top market and will be particularly important over the next couple of years. Again, as Andrew indicated, fierce competition to attract our neighbors to the north. One thing that happened, just to recap this July update, if you could, thanks. So what happened is because initially the expectation is that there would be unrestricted travel sooner. So for this vintage of forecast, Canada was downgraded because that opening didn't happen as quickly as possible. So you can see here that it was pulled down, but you can see on the next slide that what happened is, although the expectation for 2021 was pulled down, the expectation is as soon as that travel is unrestricted, that Canada will come roaring back. And you can see that the forecast was actually upgraded then for the remaining years compared to the previous forecast. So that's the economic situation that we have, but we know that consumer sentiment is really going to vary across the globe and across our key markets. And so while we've had access to some consumer sentiment about international travel or travel to the US broadly from Brand USA, we wanted to go ahead and do our own research to understand where California sits in the mind of international travelers. So at the end of June, we fielded a survey, approximately 600 sample size in 4 countries, including Canada. And that's the results that I'm going to share with you now. So the first thing that we're looking at is the likelihood to visit. And here, what I really want everyone to look at is not necessarily comparing country to country. Every country has a specific response pattern. We really want to understand, how are people responding now relative to how travelers from that country responded in the past. So we're looking at the dark blue and comparing it to the average of 2 times we asked this same question in 2019. And you can see that for Canada, the current likelihood is 10.8 points higher than the 2019 average and 49% higher than that average. In comparison, Mexico has also a 10-point greater likelihood, but because they start off of a higher percentage, that's actually only 21% higher. So we were thrilled with these results. This indicates a lot of intent to travel. And again, this is specific to California. And so we were really excited to see this measure. The next thing we really wanted to better understand is competitive context. So here we're looking at the domestic competitive context. For Canada, we're particularly looking at how we stack up against Florida, New York, and Hawaii. And we're doing a similar exercise here where we're comparing the likelihood to come to California versus the average of those 3 key competitors. You can see it's competitive. It's definitely competitive across those competitors, but we actually have a slight advantage across the average of 1.1% or 3.4 or 1.1 points or 3.4%. But we know that there's not just domestic competition, there's also international competition. So for Canada, we looked at the international competition, and we're particularly looking at the intent to go to either Mexico to our south or fly across to Europe. And you can see strong interest from Canadians to fly to Europe, to go to Europe. Of course, conditions may or may not be favorable to that. So similar to the domestic, if we compare our likelihood to the average of those markets, we again come out just barely on top there. The fourth thing we're looking at is the anticipated timing. So we know that consumers have a strong likelihood, but we wanted to understand Canadian travelers, when are they thinking that that travel would happen? You can see a similarity between our Canadian travelers and UK travelers is a relatively high percentage of uncertain, don't know. Again, this survey was taken at the end of June with announcements in movement coming in August. The next time we'll be interviewing will be in September. It may very well be that there will be more clarity, perhaps, and we'll see that uncertainty come down. On the other hand, with Delta variant spreading more quickly, that could actually keep people in the undecided. So we'll be anxious to see how unfolding events impact the next wave. But aside from the uncertainty, you can see that 40% do expect in June, they had expected that they would be able to come to California later in 2021. So actually pretty positive despite the high level of uncertainty. So this slide just summarizes those 4 measures, just using a green, yellow, red in terms of where the market is. You can see that Canada, again, great results for the likelihood to visit. Very competitive marketplace domestically and internationally, but some small advantages. And then overall, positive in terms of the timing, even with that uncertainty. And we think that uncertainty, again, will come down as circumstances become more clear about the travel restrictions. The next thing we wanted to look at, because we know international spending for California is 18% of our total spend. But for our gateways, it can be as much as 60% in San Francisco, 56% in Los Angeles. Overall, gateway cities account for 77% of all of California's international visitor spending. So in this survey, we asked about likelihood to visit the gateway regions. So here on this slide, you can see, again, we're comparing to the rate of travel likelihood to California. How likely are people to say they would be coming to either Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, or Anaheim? You can see for Canada, all 4 gateways doing very strong, showing strong marks, but particularly Los Angeles and San Francisco slightly above the California score. Okay, so the next thing we really wanted to look at are perceptions of California. The story that we've been following among our domestic audience is that over the course of 2020 and early 2021, we've seen some slight erosion of our brand health. Some of our core brand health statements have gone down a little bit of brand tarnish, as we've not been speaking to consumers, but many of our competitors have. So we wanted to understand to what degree is that an issue with international travelers. So the good news is, if you look at this next slide, on brand health, this has not decayed for Canada. The scores are actually spot on between 2019 and now, the mean scores being practically the same. So we really don't feel that that brand tarnish story seems to be a domestic story, not an international story, certainly not for Canada. We do also then compare our scores to the competitive set. We did have a larger advantage to our competitors previously. So maybe our competitors did gain on us, even though we didn't fall, but it's a pretty subtle change. The next thing that we wanted to look at are safety and destination readiness. So again, this is a concept we looked at and has been a difference among domestic competitors, among our domestic audience. We had a hypothesis that California, because we've had more stringent safety restrictions, that we might actually have a competitive advantage on safety perceptions. You can see that we have a slightly higher rating on safety than, say, Texas or Florida. Hawaii does very well on safety perception, as does Australia, New Zealand. But Canadians feel that the safest place destination of all those that we asked about is Canada. We also asked about this sense of visitor readiness. Is California ready to welcome visitors? Again, that's something that among US travelers, we were at a disadvantage to Florida. People felt like Florida had a open, ready to visit message, and we did not. But you can see that does not exist among Canadian travelers. Visitor readiness is really on par across the domestic competition. So I think that the following speakers are going to go even deeper into some of these elements of consumer sentiment and public health measures. I'm going to turn it over now to Robyn.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Heather. And, I really liked the way that Heather positioned just the overall return to travel as being dependent on three different pillars. It's the wealth and economic aspects, it's the health aspects, and then finally that, overall sentiment towards getting back out there. And I'm going to spend the next few minutes really focusing on all three of those elements and really building around some of that research around sentiment that Heather was discussing. My comments largely come from DCI's original research, Capturing the Canadian Consumer. We conducted the second edition of the study in September 2020, so really in the heart of the pandemic, and it gave us some really good information on how Canadians really intend to travel moving forward once they are able to fully re-enter the travel arena. Before we dive into that, I wanted to share kind of my own timeline around Canada's reopening and will reopen, fingers crossed. And I just want to preface this by saying this is not the official phases defined by the Canadian government, but just sort of my own timeline, which takes a look at some of those, major milestones as Canadians have returned to travel. Like the US, we saw Canada go from a complete shutdown to the allowance of some interprovincial travel. Different provinces reacted differently in how they reopened. And then the partial reopening of borders and what I referred to as phase 3, when the hotel quarantine policy was removed. And, now we're inching towards that phase 4, and that's the full reopening of borders. And that's what I'm really focusing on in my comments today, is kind of we look forward to that phase 4. One thing I think that I've depicted here is that the full return to cross-border travel is not going to be a straight line trajectory up. We are making so much progress. There's so much room for optimism, so many good indicators. But a lot of travelers, particularly Canadians, they're very conservative. And as they think about returning to travel, they're going to be cautious. It will take some time. We just heard some research in the US yesterday that sentiment towards travel has taken a hit due to the Delta variant. And some US travelers have postponed an upcoming trip or canceled a trip actually because of the variant. And Canadians are cautious, they're concerned. So they will be following that. And that's certainly important around the messaging from the California destinations and suppliers. On that theme, that the return to travel isn't going to be this sort of straight line trajectory up. I had a colleague say something to me earlier this year, and what she said was, there's never going to be a post-COVID. It's like saying post-influenza. And it's really about those triggers that make people feel safe to travel. And, she was so right in that it's not just this switch that's going to be flipped, but rather an evolution. And the rapid acceleration of immunizations in Canada has brought such a renewed sense of hope. But as we look forward, one of the underlying foundational truths around the Canadian travel is that they absolutely prioritize travel. Again, from DCI's study, we found that the love for travel was not diminished at all, as a result of COVID. And in fact, 50% said that international travel would be a priority once they were free to travel again. 49% reported that they would take more or longer international leisure trips, and 39% reported that they were likely to spend more on their international trips moving forward. So we know that, even in the depth of COVID, we knew that travel was still a priority and something that Canadians do want to spend their increased and additional savings on. So when we, again, look towards that, when Canadians begin to more fully return to international travel, we do expect to see some overarching trends. First of all, again, looking at that kind of conservative nature and just, somewhat cautious behavior, travel will continue to be practical. Travelers are first and foremost going to pick those destinations and activities where they feel safest. Booking and cancellation policies the flexibility are still going to be critical. And then health and sanitation standards are really going to remain differentiators for destinations and suppliers, and Canadians will look for those. Secondly, another theme that we've been hearing a lot about is just moving forward, people will be looking for what we are calling more soulful travel experiences. And, this isn't really anything new, but just sort of deepens the trend of people looking for more sustainable, immersive, meaningful travel experiences. And it's well documented that, really this embedding of travelers into local experiences is going to be something that's sought after. And this is a huge opportunity for smaller, less well-known, kind of more off the beaten path destinations that can provide those more immersive experiences. The challenge definitely comes into play as we look to straddle that line between that practical and the soulful. Because again, as destinations and suppliers are working to keep travelers safe through all those practical measures, they're minimizing those touch points where historically travelers and destination suppliers have intersected and where so much of that meaningful exchange occurs. So, really destinations they need to figure out how to provide those personal connections when, visitors are able to check into hotels without talking to anybody or order meals without talking to anybody. So you really want to make sure that you're still fostering those connections. And then finally, at least in the midterm, near to midterm, we're looking at a very fragmented travel ecosystem globally. There's different policies in place regarding mask wearing and other safety and sanitation standards. And this can be unsettling. So transparency on local conditions and what a traveler can expect in a market is really going to be critical in terms of communication. But given that, when we think about these overarching trends, again, there's so many positive indicators on projected travel. 87% of Canadians who had canceled plans to visit the US in 2020 are now planning to visit the next 12 months. Of those who are intending to travel outside of Canada, 72% are still in that dreaming and investigative stage of trip planning. This pattern is consistent across all the provinces. So really it is the time to double down on reaching those outbound Canadian travelers and make sure that California is top of mind. Again, based on our original research, when you're thinking about how to reach those travelers, what our research does show is that there are really two primary sources of travel inspiration for Canadians. And that includes those family and friend recommendations, which we all know are so important, but also your online sources, including general internet searches and online travel reviews. So, again, making sure you're fostering those visitors that can be brand ambassadors, obviously very important, and making their experience as positive as possible so that they can take that back to their family and friends. But again, continuing to provide relevant, timely, updated information online will also be critical as Canadians look to return to travel. One thing we also saw in the most recent edition of Capturing the Canadian Consumer is that a lot of the underlying reasons as to why Canadians travel very much aligned with what we saw back in 2017 when we first conducted this research. It doesn't appear that Canadians are sick of their kids or their parents or their grandparents because, even despite being quarantined with family for the past 18 months, Canadians still report that family vacations will be the most likely trip that they'll take when they return to international travel. And then when they're on vacation, again, very much aligning with what we saw in 2017, the activities and attractions that are of most interest are beaches, historical sites, and that outdoor recreation. Always priorities among Canadians, and just seems to actually have been accelerated or intensified as a result of the pandemic. So again, very much aligned with what we saw back in 2017. And then lastly, we were also very encouraged to see that Canadians understand that it will take some time, as we've alluded to, for airlift to return to full capacity, and that was okay with them. 60% of the respondents to our survey reported that they would be willing to take a flight with one stop or transfer on their next international leisure trip. So, that really opens up a lot of opportunities for reaching all segments of the Canadian population across all geographies. So again, really encouraging that people want to travel regardless of whether there's that one stop or transfer on their next flight. And then finally, just kind of summing up, some of the insights again, first with that one-stop accessibility being accessible or acceptable to travelers, this really opens the door for California to attract visitors from all regions of Canada and really levels the playing field. So a lot of your messaging can be consistent regardless of the region. Again, our research also showed, and our research as well as numerous studies that have come after ours shows that, again, there is that very much pent up demand for travel, and savings has been built up. So don't be afraid to promote those luxury experiences, as travelers want to spend on travel. It's going to be a priority versus other purchases. And California can certainly, certainly comes on top in terms of those luxury opportunities. And then also, lead with what travelers are looking for in terms of those experiences. Family travel, beaches, outdoor experiences are all sought after by Canadian outbound travelers. And again, this has really been consistent over the past many, many years. So again, make sure that you are promoting those activities and attractions that are of greatest interest. And then finally, again, we know Canadians are rule followers. We know they're going to be cautious as they re-enter the travel sphere. So health and safety protocols are still very, very important. Again, be very upfront on local conditions, show consistency among destinations and suppliers, and really promote those safety standards and protocols that are in place. And that will definitely be a differentiator between other, states that are maybe not as cautious and forward about what the actual safety protocols are. So at that point, I will turn it back over to Jen, and thank you so much for allowing us to join you today.
Thanks, Robin, and thanks, Heather. I think hopefully all of you on the webinar today really feel this encouragement in Canada. I think there's so many positive things coming out of the research aspect of it. And it really feels like the Canadians are ready to come and we're ready to welcome them. So moving on to media, we're really excited to have Jody with us. Jody is an award-winning journalist based in Calgary. She's done a lot of things in the media landscape and is a really great contributor to many publications such as Reader's Digest, the National Post, and the Globe and Mail. And Jody's really going to share some great insight to us and really let us know what the media is looking for and how we can best help the journalists to get ready to come back to California and to let their readers know what's happening in the state. So turning it over to you, Jody.
Thanks, Jen. Well, I can just confirm we are all very excited to travel. I don't think anyone is more excited to escape from Canada than Canadian travel journalists. I'm not sure, I think my slides will show up momentarily. I'm going to give you the media perspective, and there's 3 points that I'll be talking about. Oh, here's a bit of my bio. There we go. I'm going to talk about the travel sections. I typically am a freelance writer. However, I do dip my toe into the new media side of things with my own website and social media, of course. The perspective I'm going to be giving today will be from traditional media, so from journalists of print and broadcast. I'm going to talk about the hesitancy with travel, not from the consumer point of view, but from media, because that is there, and then give you some suggestions for how to work with Canadian media, as we are a different beast than other media from different parts of the world. So looking at the travel sections that you're seeing in print media, certainly the inches are shorter. We've been seeing this for years, and COVID did not make the situation any better. I just picked up the Globe and Mail over the weekend, which is similar to a Wall Street Journal or a New York Times for Canada, and the travel section was not in there. And during COVID, they were publishing travel once a month, and it looks that has not, it has improved slightly, but we're still not where we were before. And in my newspaper that I write frequently for Post Media News, the largest newspaper chain across Canada, typically it's 1, maybe 2 or 3 travel stories per Saturday edition. So definitely it's definitely shorter. Things are looking up, but we are currently still in that situation. There is a really strong push towards regional travel stories. A lot of outdoor adventure, that seems to be quite popular, with COVID, getting outside, but that seemed to be more palatable to the Canadian market, talking about exploring and within your local area versus getting on a plane across Canada. One thing to note about Canada is, we're a very decentralized country, and each province had their own rules and regulations for cross-border travel. In very few exceptions, these were not enforceable by law. These were just recommendations. which being rule following citizens, most people did follow. A trend I've noticed with TV, I do broadcast segments monthly with different stations nationally and also within Calgary, is, and this has never really come up before, was they wanted to know exactly what my speaking points were, what brands were being mentioned, what destinations were being mentioned. Could I give the producers the emails of all of these brands? Because they were then trying to shake them down and see if they could generate some ad revenue from them. So that was interesting. You know, as a journalist, quite often when I do TV appearances, it's just based on my research. You know, there's not often a prior deal with the destination. So I thought that was interesting, this trend toward wanting segments to be complete buyouts. So why are we seeing these trends of, you know, diminishing travel sections in print and broadcast? And on the next slide, actually, I'm not sure I'm there yet. Sorry about that. Oh, you know what? It's fine. We'll stay. The big reason, obviously, ad revenue, 100%. That's very obvious. You know, companies and destinations have had, you know, hotel associations. If you've got less people paying those hotel taxes, you know, there's just less money to go around. That makes sense. We know that will pick up. But the hesitancy, this is where I think Canada really differs from other markets, is that we are sensitive, and media editors are sensitive to backlash. And that is the response that I got from many of my editors when I was pitching stories. So a bit of context for that. The psyche of Canadians during COVID was, you know, we're all in this together. Versus, I think, when I think of the United States, I think, you know, freedom is such an integral element. And, you know, what are my personal rights? And I even saw this with the UK media. You know, they had very strict, you know, travel restrictions, and those newspapers were still pumping out travel stories, inspirational travel stories, or how to get around the hotel quarantine, where you can go. We did not see that here in Canada. I had several editors tell me, I had TV producers tell me the viewer backlash was intense. And that was one of their main reasons for not wanting to publish travel stories. They didn't want to go against the government. They didn't want to be seen to be promoting travel because it wasn't the right thing to do, even though it was not illegal. So it brings up this notion of travel shaming. So we have seen this at a micro and macro level. Neighbors, you see it on social media, were shaming others if they went across provincial lines, which was perfectly legal, but not recommended. If you had a license plate from a different province, you were at risk of getting your tires slashed. This was quite rampant in some areas of Canada. It thankfully has died down, but we saw it professionally in the travel media landscape. I have had people contact me through direct messages. Other people have publicly outed other travel writers for traveling legally during COVID. This is something I didn't see American media, British media, I did not see them facing that. And it was significant because it can damage a journalist's reputation. And we still have a bit of this hesitancy. In my city of Calgary, we have a festival. It's kind of similar to Mardi Gras. It's called the Calgary Stampede. It's a large outdoor rodeo. It's been going on for over a century, and it was canceled last year. It opened up this year, and it opened up 2 weeks after all of our public health restrictions had been lifted. So there was no city bylaw mandating masks. And still, it was very much a thing that people were shaming others to attend this outdoor festival, even though the festival had all the safety precautions in place. I know of many writers who, for their reputation, did not want to attend the Stampede. And if they did, they certainly did not publicize it, did not write about it, did not share it on social, because they were worried about that backlash. And this is an event that just took place 2 weeks ago. The third point I'll make about hesitancy is the Delta variant, which does have Canadians very worried, even though many of us have been vaccinated. I polled some of my colleagues from the Travel Media Association from across Canada, and I asked my media colleagues, for those of you that have plans to go to the US or other countries traveling this fall, how are you feeling? And I was really, really shocked to see the concern over the rising case numbers in the United States, to the effect that those that had planned a trip to the US in September, 80% of those that I polled had canceled it. It had nothing to do with the event they were going to, with the press trip, with any of that. It was entirely due to the Delta variant and concerns over the cities or the states they were going to about rising caseloads. These journalists had been double vaccinated, and their concerns were about, even if you are double vaccinated, you could still catch this variant and potentially spread it to others. That was the main reason why they had pulled back and canceled their press trip. Looking forward now, some good news about how you can work with Canadian media, because it is certainly possible, and we are very ready to tell stories about California. It is just, the psyche is a little bit different. So let's start with, it is picking up. From one of the newspaper chains that I write for, I've been asked for international stories. I've been asked for American stories. That's something that I haven't seen in the last 17 months. So definitely we're being asked for those stories now. The problem is that, the well is a bit dry. There's a lot of coverage that I've given, and, I need to get out there and get traveling to get some new stories out there. Removing the health concerns. It would be very helpful for us if destinations were upfront about the press trip. Is it an individual press trip or a group press trip? And I would venture that individual press trips probably would be more palatable. But be upfront about who they're meeting with and if they're going to be vaccinated. I just recently did a regional press trip, and it was just a solo press trip with my daughter and I. And the destination added another journalist to our dinner, which really shocked me, especially because my daughter was not vaccinated at the time. We've had media groups getting together. One was a backcountry lodge situation, and you just assume everyone was vaccinated. But one of the journalists was not vaccinated, and that actually did cause some issues. So please be upfront. I think most Canadian journalists would feel very comfortable if they knew those that they were having dinner with or meeting with or others on the press trip had that vaccination rates. I'm not sure if it's when we depart Canada or when we return to Canada, but we do need to produce a negative COVID test. The cost of these tests are around $300. So that is something, if the destination is able to cover that cost, that's helpful. An article in the Globe and Mail, you'll get paid $500. If 300 of that has to go to the COVID test, you start wondering, is this worth it for me to do it? And also, what happens if your test comes back negative, positive, and you're stuck and maybe you can't get back into the country? Can you be hosted? Can the destination help with that? I know I was in discussions with France because I was supposed to visit during COVID, and they flat out told me that I'm on my own if that's the situation. So that's definitely made me rethink if I will go back to France and when and how that will play out. Moving over to right below that, newsworthy pitches. News has to be new, of course. Certainly we're going to be able to get away with some stories, what it's like finally getting out of the country, and traveling after, being locked down for so long. But those are going to be the exceptions, not the rule. DCI did a great job in their report capturing the Canadian consumer. If you haven't had a chance to read that report, I really do suggest it, because it highlights a lot of the trends that Canadians are interested in. Certainly there is that great demand for the beach, for the great outdoors, for reuniting with family and friends, these multi-generational trips, and also that notion of luxury travel that stems from that notion of revenge travel. We're definitely seeing that notion of revenge travel. One resort town that I visited, had ran out of beef and champagne at one restaurant chain that owned 5 restaurants in the town. Promotion. If you can help, every little bit helps. So certainly we see this with influencers and new media, that often their posts or their Instagrams are being shared by the destination or the attraction. I'm not sure how often that happens with traditional media, but the more you can do that, the more you can sweeten the pot and say, yes, when your story is published, we will happily share it on our Facebook channel to, 1.6 million viewers. Things like that are very helpful to sharing the story and getting, those eyes on the page. And finally, just adjusting expectations, because the Canadian market is different. Travel sections have contracted. There are fewer freelancers out there. People have pivoted. There is a great demand for travel journalists right now. The press trips are coming in, and it's a case of supply and demand. So people are being choosy. We can't be everywhere at once. So the more you can work together, help promote those stories, help journalists feel safe. And I think that's where we'll find success and working together. But everyone is very hungry to travel and to share those stories. And certainly it is picking up from editors. And yeah, we're looking forward to a positive end of 2021. And that's it for me. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Jody. And I think that insight is so important for our destination partners to know what is the journalist going to expect when they get to the destination and what are their readers really looking for. So thank you so much for that insight. And before we get started on trade, I just wanted to remind everyone, please place any questions you have in the Q&A. It's in the bottom of the section. We do hope to have a few minutes for questions at the end. We'd love to use this great panel and get some more insight from them. So please list your questions in the Q&A. At this stage, we're going to move on to travel trade. Such an important part of the marketplace is going to be trade, especially as we recover from this COVID and from where we're at. We have two great experts who are going to share their insight, Tim with Air Canada and Nikola with AMA, which is also known as AAA here in the US. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Jen. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to share with you a little bit how we are marching forward together, especially in rebuilding our California network. On the next slide, I'd like to share a little bit of where we were. As you all recalled, demand came to a complete halt for the airlines in 2020. We reduced our capacity by over 90%. As Jody shared a little bit earlier, there's public sentiments about traveling, the flight shaming, the stay-at-home messaging from the government, the anti-visitor sentiments that we saw, uneven border closure and entry restrictions that existed, and obviously with the uncertain vaccination plan. However, with the recent announcements, we do believe that there is positive outlook coming up, and especially with the recent announcements that quarantine policies for fully vaccinated Canadians returning are being reduced and eliminated, the reopening of the Canadian border to Americans and international visitors who are fully vaccinated. And with that, we saw significant leisure demand. On the chart to the left, you see a little bit of where we think the projection is going to go. Cautiously optimistic, we think it's going to be somewhere in between the middle and the second and the third line, from the top. Obviously, that's going to be dependent on how the border restrictions hold, the reopening, and also the confidence that consumers will have in traveling, making sure that they have a safe journey. And that's something that we've been working hard to do. Obviously, the other part of that is the capacity of Customs and Border Control at key airports, being able to facilitate all of the demands that are coming back, and also what's going to happen with the various virus variants that are popping up, and observing that closely. That all has potential impact on consumer confidence and also demand for travel. However, we are confident and we are poised to continue our leadership position as the largest transporter carrier and largest international airline flying to the United States. We will be resuming flights to 34 airports in the United States come August of this year. Many of the dots that you see here in red are ones we're already operating flights to. Those in yellow are the ones we're returning. And I'm excited to say that we will be returning to California with 4 gateway cities this summer. On this next slide, I'd like to share a little bit of what we're going to do to steadily restoring our capacity to California. As I mentioned, come August, we will be flying to Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego. That's up to 13 flights a day. 13 flights a day. By October of this year, we will be adding, very excited about this, Orange County to our roster of flights. And that will be 4 cities in California and up to 20 flights a day into California from Canada. some of these, and this is exciting because this shows us that there is significant demand and we are able to bring these flights back. What we've seen in the past is that there is so much demand that we want to make sure that we have the best aircraft to connect. And what you see here is we will be deploying our 787s, the 737 MAXs, and also very excited about the A220s, the newest aircraft in our narrow body aircraft in our fleet. And what we will do is we'll be flying to California from our 3 hubs, connecting all of Canada, over 30 cities in Canada to California in a one-stop journey. And that will enable us to bring more of California to Canadians and making sure that we connect all of Canada to California. And that is something that we're excited to share. The 787s will be deployed on the larger larger routes from Toronto, with the MAXs and the A220s coming from Vancouver and supplementing the Toronto and Montreal routes. That will ensure us also, on the next slide, you'll see it provides connectivity to our vast European network. I know that we're talking about Canada today, but as the largest carriers across the Atlantic, we want to make sure that we're also bringing those customers to Canada and accessing all of these points that we're currently flying to in Europe to California as well through our 3 major hubs. Last but not least, we are also working very hard to design a safe and frictionless, yet personable and welcoming experience, both on board and at the airport. A lot of customers have expressed that they're concerned about too much interactions with people. They are concerned about what would happen to them on the journey. And at the very onset of the pandemic, we launched the Air Canada Clean Care Plus program, where we were an industry leader in actually the whole biosafety measures that were implemented. So on the ground, we are investing in a lot of technology to focus on touch-free and mobile-driven mobile experiences, really driven by customer needs. This goes from touch-free bag drop, where you scan your boarding pass that you have already received on your phone, to self-entry gates at lounges, and also biometric boarding systems. In flight, we are looking at how to provide a smooth and personable experience without having too much but yet reducing that interpersonal contact sometimes that customers are concerned about. Looking at contactless onboard retail experience, more customized flight experience for customers that they can actually do from their seats, and also adjusting our flight attendants' interaction with customers to make sure that they provide the services, but at the same time maintaining that safety measure. All of this is focused on leveraging our mobile app experience and technology as part of that self-service point for products and amenities. All to say is we are ready to go back to California. We are flying to San Francisco today. We're flying to Los Angeles today. We're flying to San Diego. We're excited to bring more flights back. We're excited to bring more Canadians to California. And we are looking forward to working with all of you in every way we can to promote California to Canadians. And now I will hand over to Nikola, who will share with you a little bit of her perspective.
Thanks, Tim, and hi, everyone. Really excited to be here and talk to you. First of all, just a little explanation about AMA. So we're the CAA Alberta Motor Association, and we are a membership organization just like AAA, and we offer multiple lines of business, including travel, retail services to all of our members. We've been in the retail travel business for over 59 years, and we're the largest retail operation in the province of Alberta. And we have 16 retail locations, including a call center, as well as over 150 travel counselors. And we serve over 975,000 members at AMA. So just to talk a little bit about some of the current landscape in Alberta, this province has remained the most open during COVID. And while we've had multiple shutdowns, it's been the beginning of this year when we started to do active marketing, more dreaming content, talking about destinations. We were introducing some partner offers back to members since early this year. And all of our messaging and focus has been around traveling in late 2021, but mostly preparing for 2022 and 2023. We know that there's going to be some reduced capacity and prices are going to go up. So we've been talking to members about how to plan their investment in a safe way. Lots of the suppliers are offering very flexible change and cancellation penalties. And so that's encouraging a lot of people to look forward down the road. And our member engagement has been extremely positive and actually higher than pre-COVID-19. And while you heard in some of the earlier presentations that there's been some backlash around people talking in a negative way about those who were promoting travel, we have had little to no negative impact from our member engagement. And so that's been really encouraging for us, and that's been helping us increase the amount of conversations we're having with our members. We've heard lots in the presentations around the conservativeness of Canadians relative to travel, and they're waiting for the government and for companies like AMA to tell them when it's safe to travel. And the number one indicator for that is going to be when the Canadian government removes the level 3 non-essential travel advisory. But I'm going to talk a little bit later about some of the positive indicators coming, and we're really excited to see that there's increased lift coming out of Canada, especially into California. So how long do we think it's going to take for travel demand to return? There's been lots of studies being done over the last 11, 12 months, and generally it's looking like 2024 is globally when it's going to return. AMA is currently seeing booking volume at about 40% of 2019 levels over the last 2 months. So big ramp up since some of the restrictions have been started to be relaxed around international travel, whether it's allowing vaccinated Americans to cross our land border. But we're also very excited on August 9th to have our Edmonton International Airport open out of our capital city, which will be one of the 5 airports doing international flights in and out of Canada on that date, as well as the removal of the mandatory hotel quarantine, which was a huge barrier for travel. So lots of positive indicators. And like what you've heard earlier, hygiene, cleanliness, flexibility is what's really driving consumers' most important factors around when they're booking their next vacation. So some of the trends that we're seeing in consumer behavior, definitely digital adoption. And, we're going to see a lot of online travel agencies gain ground. We have a great online platform for our members to book with us. But interestingly, 90% of our business comes through our travel counselors. And so while we're going to see some shift on that, we've also seen the shift in the demand for travel counselors. And I have some statistics in a survey just coming up in a couple of slides to speak to that as well. Brand is also going to be extremely important for people. So whether it's a hotel brand or an attraction brand, our brand has been voted the 2nd most trusted brand in Canada last year, and we are the #1 most trusted brand in Canada this year. So we're really excited about that because that's going to drive a lot of new business to us and a lot of loyalty and repeat business. Some of the travel patterns are very interesting. Way more bucket list trips, much longer durations. 55% of travelers are going to say they're traveling for more than 14 days at a time, and 60% more are expected to take a couple of trips a year. So while maybe people in the past were maybe only taking 1 trip a year or every 2 years, we're seeing that pent-up demand is now compiling, and people are going to book more to make sure they can take advantage of traveling right away. We've seen some coined phrases like revenge travel. They're not going to be, not allowed to travel again. So they want to get it in case any other shutdowns come down. Of course, we hope that that doesn't happen. And we've all learned a lot to make sure that we are prepared for this moving forward. Family vacations are huge, especially small groups, small family member groups traveling together. You'll hear often in our centers, a travel counselor will book 1 couple. They went home and told a few family members. The next day, a couple of more booking with that counselor to go on the same trip. And they're going to be spending some time to celebrate those missed milestones, building new memories with the grandkids they haven't been able to spend that close time with over the last year and a half. Also, the destinations that are safe and secure. So really key to hear what we heard from Heather earlier and talking about, those sentiments. We're seeing that as well. And value. We offer a lot of value from CAA and AMA and AAA with exclusive hotel rates and exclusive member offers. And they're going to be looking for more of that as they move forward. Supporting local is also what we're seeing. 77% agree that they want to be more conscious about supporting small local businesses when travel. And we're also going to start seeing, if not already, well, certainly already because of COVID with the shutdowns, but business travel is expected to decline. More organizations have become better at doing virtual solutions, virtual conferences, and so we don't expect to see business travel return to the same level that it was pre-COVID. So this was really timely that we were invited to speak with you today because we've just launched an AMA member survey in early July. And I wanted to share some of the statistics from this slide because these are really tying well to what we're seeing happening into California. And California is one of our top 5 destinations out of Alberta. 49% of respondents said that it will be a while before they consider leaving the country, but 25% are already booked or in the midst of planning, and that they look to travel as soon as the restrictions are lifted. Their comfort level, it's split right down the middle. So like 40% are really excited and 40% are a little bit scared and a little bit anxious. But of those that are planning to book, 59% plan to travel before the end of this year. So again, speaking to that pent-up demand. And then 28% plan to travel in early 2022. Of those that are already booked or plan to book, 68% plan to go to the US. You heard low-hanging fruit earlier. Well, we also see the US as low-hanging fruit from our perspective. When we do a lot of marketing into California, as well as some of the other states that you heard earlier in the competition realm. But we are seeing 94% are flying, so we might see less drive traffic because of what's happened at the land borders. 69% plan on staying in a hotel. They're going to plan to visit points of interest, and they're going to try local foods and do outdoor activities. So they're going to remain very active and very busy in their vacations. And 23% are more likely to use a travel counselor. So we really liked to hear that because we speak a lot about our value proposition to our members. We do have a fee model, so we charge a professional consulting fee for our bookings, and it's important that we continue to deliver that value. So education on the destinations is also very important for our travel counselors. So while we still have some challenges to overcome, there's going to be things like reduced capacity that's going to drive up pricing, the travel advisory that I mentioned earlier. We don't yet have a great solution for vaccinating young children, so that could impact families from traveling. The COVID tests are still required when returning into Canada. So Jody mentioned that. And yes, you do require a negative PCR test on arrival, whether you're crossing by land or into an airport in Canada. And then there are still some quarantine rules relative to that if you test positive on that test. When you arrive in Canada, you have to do a second test as well. But the positive indicators are going to be more around, like I said, the airport opening up and the removal of the mandatory hotel quarantine. And we're excited to see what the announcement is on the 21st of August from the US government, whether they're going to open the land border for fully vaccinated Canadians into America. But just the fact that international airports are broadening, that's going to drive a lot of our business. So I really want to thank everyone for having me speak today. And certainly if you have any questions, please do let me know. But we've engaged our travel partners, our tourist boards alike, and we're poised and ready to provide advice and guidance and get people back traveling. Thanks very much. And I'll hand it back over to Jennifer.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you so much, Tim and Nikola. I think that was excellent information. And the airlift is so encouraging. And there's so many positive signs for Canada. We know that there's still challenges ahead like there are for all of our markets, but we really think that we're in a great start and we're excited to see what we can get from Canada. And I like hearing today about immediate travel. I think one thing that I really just wanted to remind everyone that California is a great getaway for Canadians. We know that last winter, they didn't get to go anywhere for their little sun getaways. And I know that they're not going to want to have another winter of Canada. So we really do look forward to welcoming them to California this year and in the immediate future. So we do have some questions that I'm going to spend a few minutes on. So I'm going to start with you, Andy. I know you mentioned a little bit about the luxury traveler, and I know we also heard that from Jody with the revenge travel and people are willing to spend money. So talk a little bit about the luxury travel and how California can capitalize on that.
Sure, I'll I'll start from a competitive perspective, and then maybe one of the other panelists will jump in as well. I shared at the beginning, Texas, Florida, Nevada, with those other products, and they're fine travel products, but they just don't compare on the luxury level with California. Maybe Hawaii does to a certain perspective, but you heard from both Robyn and I that savings are up. The exchange rate is good. In terms of the luxury traveler, I think it's a really strong opportunity for California right now, and your product just fits the market need so well. So I'll start off there. Anyone else want to comment on the luxury traveler and California right now?
Sure, I can certainly chime in a little bit on that, Andrew, as well. We are seeing that luxury is definitely picking up. People are looking for an experience nowadays, and they're looking to spend more money, like we talked about earlier. So I think promoting suites and promoting private transportations and experiences that are more unique for just the family to do on their own, whether it's at an attraction or a point of interest, I think those are really going to become more popular. So not forgetting to promote those, I think, is what's going to be key.
And from Visit California, we did start to promote the luxury travel in Canada for about the last 3 years. So I do think we have a good base, and we've had our partners. We did have a luxury summit in Canada where we actually focused on the luxury operators and media. So we're excited that we at least have that base and hope that that could continue. So a couple other questions that I wanted to have. One for you, Jody. On the in the media front, do you have any new destinations that are popping up in this COVID post time? Because we know we're hearing from some other destinations that so-and-so has been really active and they could be a new competitor. So just curious, any new unexpected or expected destinations?
That's really interesting. And to be honest with you, what's most noticeable are the destinations that are absent. And we're definitely seeing a push, Canadian media seeing a huge push from Destination Canada, and a real push to get us to promote only Canadian destinations and to publicly take a pledge that we ourselves will only travel within Canada for the remainder of 2021, a pledge which I did not take. So I think as far as for new destinations, honestly, I haven't been seeing it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for California. And yeah.
Tim, one quick question about Air Canada. Tell us about, we know that Canadians love their value, and they also love their points. So tell us a little bit about your Aeroplan and what that's looking like.
So for those of you who don't know, we actually brought Aeroplan back into the Air Canada family a year and a half, 2 years ago. And since then, we also relaunched the program at the end of last year. So with more options and more benefits for Aeroplan members. Now we have a new feature where families can actually pool their points together for reward redemptions. And funny you talk about Canadians liking their points. We actually saw a significant surge in searches, especially for redemption searches for leisure destinations when the government went out with the recent restrictions. The searches for popular destinations such as California, some of your competitive destinations, Florida, even Europe, we saw a significant jump in the 2 to 3 times more searches for those type of leisure destinations. We made the program more palatable, easier to use in the sense that now every seat on the aircraft can be redeemed with your Aeroplan points. So that makes those points even more valuable. So it's really exciting that we were able to make those program changes and implement them. And at the same time, with the recent increased desire for travel, we also saw that starting to really take off and people take advantage of that.
Excellent. Yeah, whenever I'm in Canada, I always hear about the time of the year they get their points and what they're going to do with it. So it definitely is a point heavy country, which I think is fun. And I think Americans who we leave so many of our points on the table, we should probably learn from Canada because they seem to know how to redeem their points much better than I do. So Heather and Robyn, one quick question, maybe you guys can, kind of bounce back and forth on it. What's the one thing that kind of surprised you about the research on a positive front? Because I know that Canada, like we both have all heard, is kind of started slow, but it definitely had a kind of a quick pickup. So what's the one surprise that came to you from the research? Heather and Robyn? I'll start with Robyn.
Great, thanks, Jen. I think not necessarily surprising, but I think encouraging was that there was so much consistency in terms of how Canadians want to travel over time. COVID has not seemed to change that. And, they are just as committed to traveling internationally. They're just as committed to engaging with, similar attractions and amenities as they were previous and prior to the pandemic. So to me, that's very encouraging that they will continue to place that priority on making sure that they are, or they're committing more of that savings to travel versus other consumer goods. And it's those experiences that are the most meaningful.
And I would just say we knew that the economic fundamentals were there, if favorable for travel to resume from Canada. But I think because we do know that Canadians are more safety conscious, more concerned, more rule followers, as other panelists have said, would that mean that the sentiment would not necessarily have grown? And so I was really pleasantly surprised to see the increase in likelihood to visit over pre-pandemic levels. I think that was really, really encouraging to see that in the data. And although I pointed out that high level of uncertainty, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Again, I think Canadians are like, we don't exactly know when, all the restrictions will indicators are there. There's clearly the desire to come and visit. So
I'll just jump in, Jen, with one comment that stuck out to me in the presentations today is the willingness of Canadians to take indirect flights in order to travel. Tim put up that beautiful sort of, your entire network, and not every flight, every airport has direct service to California, with one stop, anywhere in Canada, you can get to California. And I thought that was really, really encouraging to see. And
just to chime in on that as well, I think the advantage we have in the Canadian airports is the fact that we have pre-clearance here in the Canadian airports entering the United States. So when you land in the United States, it's a domestic flight, which makes that travel experience that much easier. While you're connecting, you're going through your instead of waiting at the at the terminal for your flight, you're really clearing customs and saves that time already. So I think that's an advantage that Canada has versus a lot of other countries, and to get people get used to that, that's it's a great thing we could do.
That's a great tip. People forget about that. So last question, because we're actually right on time, which is very exciting. So Nikola, tell us a little bit about how you have shifted at AMA and what you kind of recommend, what you've done internally that's a little different than you've done pre-pandemic.
Well, some of the things that we've been working on are how certainly to protect our staff and make sure that we have travel counselors poised and ready. So while we may have moved them to a different business line within the company, we're now in our travel rebound plans, and we've got counselors doing their training to re-enter into their travel position and be ready, which means a lot of destination training, a lot of supplier training. And I think that when we look at how we're moving forward with our plans, it's really around that marketing engagement that I spoke about. And we're a little bit unique to some of our other counterparts at the other CA clubs across Canada, where we've been quite more active in talking about booking now for travel down the road. We don't have a crystal ball that tells us when the advisory is going to be lifted, but we are guiding and counseling people on how to make sure that they're booking with a supplier with flexible change and cancellation options so that they can lift and shift their booking as we go down the path. That's probably the number one thing that we've been focusing on, is just keeping that communication very open.
Excellent. Well, we're out of time, but I really hope that everyone on the webinar today really learned how important Canada is. Sometimes we forget our neighbors to the north, but clearly they are an excellent group for California. They love to come to California. They love to come year round. The research really states that they're a great market for us. I know our partners will hopefully be able to see you all soon in market and also welcome Canadians here to California. So thanks everyone for your time and thanks for joining us.